Imagine a man, not a king, not a priest, not a scholar, just a man. Someone you'd probably walk past in the marketplace without a second glance. He worked with his hands, kept to himself. He was ordinary in every way, except for the burden he carried deep within. He had a wife, a family, a quiet life. But beneath the surface, there was a hunger. The kind of hunger that starts small and innocent, but grows when left unchecked. The world called it desire. The Bible calls it lust. And lust? It doesn't knock politely. It whispers. It tempts. It promises something better, more exciting, more fulfilling. That's how the story begins. And maybe that's where your story begins too. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And if this message speaks to you, consider liking the video, sharing it with someone you love, or even becoming a member to support this mission of telling deep, soul-stirring stories from the Word. Now, back to our story. He lived in a sun-scorched village, surrounded by olive trees and cracked earth. His days were spent working the land, hauling water, and tending to livestock. His nights, they should have been restful, peaceful. But something had started to stir inside him, a longing he couldn't explain. It began with a glance, just a moment, a passing look at another woman who wasn't his wife. He thought nothing of it at first, but then came the second look, and the third, each one pulling him further away from the vow he had once made. You see, that's how temptation works. It's rarely loud. It doesn't barge in. It seeps in quietly, like a slow leak under the surface. And before you realize what's happening, you're drowning. This man, let's call him Levi, didn't wake up one day, planning to betray his wife. But sin doesn't always come with a plan. Sometimes, it just waits for a moment of weakness. And Levi gave it one. The woman he saw was known in the village, not for her kindness or faith, but for her beauty. Some whispered about her past. Others avoided her altogether. But Levi was drawn to her. He started finding excuses to be near her, bringing her figs from his orchard, offering help she didn't ask for. It was subtle, but it was real. His wife noticed. She always did. Wives can sense when the heart starts drifting, even before the body follows. She asked him if something was wrong. He said no. He lied. Not just to her, but to himself. He told himself it was harmless. Just friendly conversation. Just neighborly kindness. But deep down, he knew the truth. And late at night, when everyone else was asleep, the guilt began to gnaw at his soul. Still, the hunger grew. Then came the day everything changed. He stayed behind from the market that morning, said he wasn't feeling well. In truth, he was waiting for a moment when she'd be alone, and she was. What happened next, he would regret for the rest of his life. One decision, one night, and the weight of shame became too heavy to bear. Lust promises fulfillment, but it always leaves you emptier than before. Levi had tasted the fruit of forbidden desire, and it turned to ash in his mouth. The days that followed were a blur. He couldn't look his wife in the eyes. He avoided his children. He stopped going to synagogue. Every corner of the village seemed to whisper his name in judgment, even if no one knew what had happened. But someone did know: God. And when God knows, He doesn't turn His face away. He doesn't abandon us in the pit. He enters into it, not with condemnation, but with conviction, with the kind of love that doesn't ignore your sin, but invites you out of it. One morning, as Levi stood by the edge of his field, staring into nothing, he felt it. Not a voice, not a vision, but a pressure on his soul, a holy weight. It was time to confess, not just to his wife, but to the God he had betrayed. That night, Levi finally spoke the truth. His wife wept. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She just wept. Not because she hated him, but because she loved him. And because betrayal from someone you love cuts deeper than any sword. He expected her to leave, but she didn't. She prayed. Right there in the dirt floor of their small home, she prayed out loud. Through tears and shaking hands, she asked God to do the impossible, to heal what had been broken. And God heard, because that's who He is. He's not just the God of second chances. He's the God of restoration, of rebuilding, of taking what the enemy meant for destruction and using it for glory. Levi's healing didn't happen overnight. Trust takes time. Wounds take time. But healing? Real healing. It began the moment he stopped running and started repenting. Lust didn't get the final word in Levi's life. Levi's confession didn't fix everything, not instantly. The next morning, the village was still the same. The fig trees still swayed in the wind. The sheep still grazed on the hill. But inside his home, and more importantly, inside his heart, something had changed. There was still shame, still awkward silence between him and his wife. But there was also something new, something small, something fragile. Hope. It started with little things. He returned to his work with more intention, spoke more gently to his children, stayed close to home instead of wandering into town for no reason. His wife watched him, unsure at first if this change would last. But she noticed, and quietly, she began to heal too. Some nights, Levi couldn't sleep. The memory of what he had done haunted him. He'd sit outside under the stars, whispering prayers he wasn't sure how to finish. God, I don't know how to make this right. And slowly, night after night, God began to speak, not with thunder or fire, but through scripture, through silence, through the quiet warmth of conviction. Levi started reading the scrolls again, especially the Psalms. He read the words of David, another man who had fallen to lust and found grace in the arms of repentance. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Those words became Levi's anthem. He began attending synagogue again. People noticed. At first, they whispered. Then they stared. Then slowly, they began to speak to him again. Some offered polite nods. Others weren't so kind. You know how people are, especially in small communities. Rumors live long, even if the truth changes. But Levi didn't return to prove anything. He came to worship. It was during one of those gatherings that the rabbi spoke of healing, not just physical, but spiritual. He said, "Some wounds are invisible, but they bleed just as much. And the only balm strong enough to stop that kind of bleeding is God's mercy." Levi looked over at his wife. Her eyes were closed, her hands open in prayer. That moment, that simple, sacred moment, reminded him of the goodness of God. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up in quiet moments. A shared meal that doesn't end in silence. A child laughing again. A wife brushing past her husband in the kitchen without flinching. It's slow, messy, but real. Levi didn't just want forgiveness anymore. He wanted restoration. So he started serving, not in some grand, showy way, but in the ordinary, fixing a neighbor's roof, helping an old widow carry water, giving his best fruit to families in need. Not because he was trying to earn redemption, but because he had received it. One day, months after his fall, the other woman, left the village. No one really knew why. Some said she moved to be with a relative. Others said her shame had finally caught up to her. Levi never saw her again. And maybe that was mercy too. He didn't hate her. In truth, he prayed for her. Prayed that she would also find healing, find freedom, find grace. Because sin doesn't just hurt the one who commits it. It wounds everyone in its path. Levi knew that now. As the seasons changed, something else began to shift. The way people looked at him. Not with judgment anymore, but curiosity. How did he come back from that? How did he rebuild a life that should have crumbled? The answer wasn't in him. It was in the God who had carried him. Levi started sharing his story. Quietly at first, one-on-one conversations with men who were struggling. Husbands on the brink of making the same mistake. Young boys whose eyes were already drawn toward lustful things. He didn't preach. He shared. He warned. He wept with them. And he pointed them to the same mercy that had rescued him. One day during a gathering, the rabbi invited Levi to speak. It was a simple moment. No title, no ceremony. Just a broken man made whole, standing before his people. He told them the truth. Not just about what he had done, but about who God is. The one who sees all, knows all, and still offers forgiveness. I'm not proud of where I've been, he said, but I'm thankful for where God brought me. I thought lust had ruined me. I thought I was beyond repair. But God doesn't throw people away. He rebuilds them. And in the back row, his wife sat with tears in her eyes. Because she knew, better than anyone, just how true that was. Lust had once been Levi's master, but now, grace was his guide. And maybe that's the message someone needs today. Not that you'll never stumble, but that when you do, there is a way back. A path that doesn't end in shame, but in healing. Levi's story isn't unique because he fell. It's powerful because he got back up. And the same can happen for you. Because lust may be loud, but love, real, divine love, is stronger. Years passed. Levi's name no longer stirred whispers. The scandal that once defined him became just another page in a longer, deeper story. A story of restoration, faith, and quiet courage. He never claimed to be a teacher, never wore special robes, but people started coming to him. Not because he was perfect, but because he had been broken and healed. And they were searching for that same healing. Young husbands would sit beside him as he worked the soil and ask, "How did you fight the urges?" Women would ask, "How did your wife forgive you?" And older men who had carried secret shame for decades, would come not to speak, but just to sit near someone who had survived what they still feared. Levi never claimed wisdom, but his wounds had become his testimony. He often told people, "Lust doesn't just want your body, it wants your soul. It promises pleasure, but it delivers isolation. And the deeper you go into it, the harder it is to remember who you really are." He spoke of guardrails, protecting your eyes, your time, your heart. He told them how he learned to catch himself at the first glance, to confess temptations before they turned into decisions. He encouraged confession, real, raw confession, not to feel shame, but to start healing. "Bring it into the light," he would say, "because darkness only grows where we refuse to shine truth." His wife, too, became a quiet pillar in the community. She never stood up in front of a crowd, but her life was louder than any speech. People saw her love her husband without bitterness. They watched her laugh again, lead her children with grace, and speak with a wisdom forged in fire. She would often say, "Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing to build again, brick by brick, even when your hands are still shaking." Her strength was part of Levi's healing. Her forgiveness, part of his redemption. One evening, Levi stood with his son by the fig trees. The boy was old enough now to ask the hard questions. "Father, did you ever hurt Mother?" The words caught Levi off guard. He looked at his son, not with fear, but with calm. And then he told the truth. Gently, carefully, but truthfully. "Yes, son, I did. I made a choice I will regret for the rest of my life. But I also turned back to God. I confessed. I changed. And your mother, she showed me mercy." The boy didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "That's what I want to be like. Both of you." Levi smiled, tears quietly rising, because he knew that moment was the fruit of grace. Levi's story spread far beyond his village, not because it was dramatic, but because it was relatable, raw, real. People didn't need a superhero. They needed a man who failed and got back up. And that's exactly who he became. He started mentoring younger men, walking with them, teaching them how to guard their hearts, how to be honest before God and their wives, how to repair what sin tries to destroy. He didn't offer easy answers, but he offered presence, and that changed everything. One of the last times Levi spoke publicly, he said this: "I used to think I was ruined, that what I did had disqualified me from God's purpose. But I was wrong. God doesn't erase broken stories. He rewrites them. He turned my betrayal into a lesson, my shame into strength, my fall into a testimony. And if he did it for me, he can do it for you." Those words echoed long after he stepped down. Because in a world obsessed with hiding flaws and pretending perfection, Levi's life became proof that God's grace isn't just a concept. It's a living force. He died many years later, not a rich man, not a famous man, but a man at peace. A man remembered not for his failure, but for his faithfulness afterward. At his funeral, his wife held the hand of their eldest son, the same son who once asked that difficult question. Now a man himself, raising a family of his own, anchored by a father's mistakes and a father's redemption. People came from nearby towns to honor Levi, to say thank you, to cry, to celebrate. Because his life wasn't just about him. It was about the God who takes ruins and rebuilds. So, what does that mean for you? Maybe you've made mistakes. Maybe you've fallen into lust or betrayal or sin you've carried silently for years. Maybe you're afraid you've gone too far to be healed. Friend, hear me. You haven't. You are not beyond God's reach. You are not too far gone. You are not too broken. You are exactly the kind of person He loves to redeem. Levi's story isn't just history. It's a mirror, a call, an invitation. If this story touched you, don't leave without doing something about it. Like the video so more people can hear stories like this. Share it with someone who needs healing. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. And if you want to help bring more stories like this to life, become a member. Your support helps this mission keep growing, because here's the truth. God isn't finished with you yet. And maybe, just maybe, the next great story of healing and redemption will be yours. Until then, keep walking in grace. Keep listening to His voice. And remember, your story matters. Tell us in the comments. What part of Levi's journey spoke to you most? Let's build a space of honesty, faith, and healing together.